Welcome to the Parenting Then and Now podcast, the show that remembers the good and sometimes the not so good old days of parenting past. I'm your host, Samantha Kemp-Jackson from the Multiple Mayhem Mama blog, and every week we'll be talking about how things were then and how they are now, parenting through the lens of the ages, if you will. Now, whether you're a parent, a kid, or someone who used to be a kid, you'll want to stay tuned as we reminisce about the past, embrace the future, and marvel in the present how things have changed. If you're ready to glance back in time at kids, parenting, and the good old days, you're in the right place. So sit back, relax, and let's take a trip down parenting's memory lane. I hope you enjoyed this episode. A surgeon's sense of order makes a lot of sense. Think about it. Everything must have its place in the OR because, if not, there could be grave consequences for the patient on the operating table. Clare Kumar learned this truth at a young age while growing up in a household that was led by her father, a surgeon, and her mother, who had trained as a nurse. Though her mom was not as methodical in her organization, her father was, and this is perhaps where Clare got to where she is today, a devoted coach and productivity catalyst who helps those who need guidance in living their lives as productively and as stress-free as possible. Clare's journey from a child of the 70s, growing up in various cities in Canada, and her trek through corporate life has led her to her current success. How did her childhood affect her behavior as both a mother and now as a productivity coach? Did her father's precision as an organized and methodical surgeon inform her current perspective? These are just some of the questions that I posed to Clare during our discussion for the show. Take a listen. I think you'll like the wisdom that Clare has to offer. Here's our interview. So welcome to the Parenting Then and Now podcast, Clare. Thanks for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's so great to have you. And part of the reason I wanted to have you on the show is that you are a productivity catalyst, and I'm intrigued by that title. And I think there's a lot to be said about productivity, people's attention spans, their ability to get stuff done, and all of those related things in our world today. And I think it has a lot to do with perhaps technology, perhaps feeling distracted. So I'd like to talk about that kind of along the lines of being a parent and parenting and comparatively how we grew up without all these distractions and how you handle this with your clients within your business. So let's start with talking about your childhood. Tell me about where you grew up and when, what decade, and what it was like.
Wow. So I was a 1967 baby, grew up in England for the first few years of my life, but at 4 years old moved over to Canada. My dad was a surgeon and decided to move from England to Canada for more opportunity. Being a person with brown skin color, being from India, he wasn't feeling the opportunities were there in Britain for him. And so came over here and we bounced around from London 6 months, Hamilton 2 years, Chatham 4 years, and then Waterloo is where I had my high school years, middle school and high school.
Wow, that's really interesting. We've got a couple things in common because my parents did the immigrant Jamaica to England to Canada 60s, 70s. I came here when I was 3, but it's not about me today. It's about you. So in that sense, you grew up, you were a child of the 1970s then, as I was. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your typical childhood. What were you doing on a day-to-day basis? Tell me about your family configurations. How many brothers, sisters, all that stuff?
I am the eldest of 2 younger sisters. I also had an older brother, but he only lived for 19 hours. So he's somebody I never knew, which is unfortunate because my mom always said he would have kept me in line, which would have been good for me. But I in all effects, I was the eldest of two other girls, and growing up with a father who was a surgeon, as I mentioned. My mom was a nurse before we came along, but she decided to devote her time to raising us, and it wasn't until we were older that she went back to work with my dad in his office.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I had essentially a stay-at-home mom who was there devoted to supporting our growth, whether it was my middle sister, who was quite an accomplished gymnast, and traveling and taking her to practices and meets and so on. So I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember playing tennis as a family, and that's something I've continued and do with my kids now when they'll have me. I remember, I think the good memories come up for me. I was obsessed with Barbies. I was afraid when I was 13 I was not going to outgrow them.
Really?
Like, really afraid that there's going to be something wrong with me. Yeah, I don't know what it was. I loved miniatures. I suppose it was role playing and acting things out with the dolls, and it was a creative form of expression too, making everything, because we weren't able to buy all this stuff, so I had to make it. So there was
That's
that
interesting. So your mother was a stay-at-home mom for most of your childhood.
Yeah.
You were the oldest of 3 girls. What is the age span? What's the difference in years between you and your sisters?
So first me, and then my middle sister 19 months after I came along, and then a 4-year gap after that. So my youngest sister's about 6 years younger than me. And interesting, as I look back at the what that does, imagine at 19 months, and I experienced this with my daughter when she was 19 months, fierce need to be independent, no words. But and this tug of war, because when I was 19 months, my mom was watching my sister, and my sister unfortunately had a lot of allergies, still does, and was very needy, so couldn't give me the independence, couldn't keep an eye on me and the little one. So I think there was some formative stuff that happened in that time that was probably challenging for my spirit.
Right. Well, this is really interesting because I know you outside of this podcast, and one thing that I really admire about you is that you are a very together, organized person, and you are somebody that I aspire to be like. I don't think I'll ever get to that point, but you're very organized, and I know that that's your line of work. Do you think that you got into that career path as a result of your family background and the fact that, you're the oldest, and they say that the oldest child oftentimes takes the lead and is very organized, but also the fact that you had the 2 sisters and your mom, and what do you think about that?
I love the question because I've thought about it a lot. I mean, my dad was a surgeon, and I don't know about most surgeons, but you've got to be organized. Otherwise, you're going to leave something in the wrong place. So there's a methodical nature. But I think that was, I will say, beat into my father in India when he was the youngest of 6. And I remember a story where he said if the shoes were out of line, didn't matter why they were out of line, he got the beating from his father.
Oh, boy.
When the shoes were out of line. So there's stuff that's then wired in. So genetic or wired in, whenever. I think from my dad, I picked up really good. I had a really good role model for methodical thinking. Prepare the space before you do something. Don't just stand in the middle of all this chaos and start. Something will go wrong. You'll get hurt. Something won't be accomplished to the best that it can. So watching my dad from that perspective, I had a fabulous role model. My mom, on the other hand, they're quite different people. Wonderful couple, wonderful loving couple, but very different. My mom would come home every day and say, leaving to leave. Where are my keys? Where are my keys? I can't find my keys. And they would be in a different spot every day. And the stress that she would experience, she would gladly share with all of us.
Yes.
She's, struggling to find her keys. And so I had examples of both. And I think that's common in a lot of families. We're wired differently. So that's the background piece. Personally, I believe I'm a highly sensitive person. Elaine Ahrens wrote a great book about what that is. And basically your nervous system is basically on high alert. Think of a meerkat and, standing up on its high legs, playing the sentry on watch for everybody else around. So a highly developed system to be on guard. Well, my nervous system's like that all the time. And so I think I developed organizing skills to dial the volume in my world down, figuratively and literally sometimes too.
That's really interesting. When you say highly sensitive person, is that a medical diagnosis? Is it a medical term? How is that determined? Because I think that there are probably a lot of highly sensitive people who are undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. And, we can talk a little bit more about how you have manifested your work to helping people who are similar to yourself, but I'm curious about the diagnosis.
Well, I haven't actually talked about it with my doctor. It's been sort of self-discovery and reading Elaine's book. And you can take a quiz on her website or in the book and to self-diagnose the symptoms that you're experiencing. And it's just years of living with that and noticing even when I was in the corporate world before I became an entrepreneur, which is really a byproduct of trying to create an environment in which I can thrive. Feeling that the regular get on the subway, get down to work in a dark office, get back on the subway, get in the car, drive to the daycare to pick up the kids. In February, when I do have seasonal affective disorder as well, I'm a bit of a mess.
You're not a mess at all.
So with these challenges, I realized I needed to craft a different kind of working environment, one in which I could thrive, and I lobby for that now. And so when I say productivity catalyst, I'm a coach. I'm a speaker around it as well because I have a really big drive to get the message out that we need to understand what we need as human individuals to thrive and be most productive, but we also need corporate environments that are compassionate and say, hey, Samantha, what do you need so that you can make your best contribution?
I love that, and I completely agree. We're both entrepreneurs because I left the corporate world too because my brain works a little bit differently, and I tend to think of a lot of things all at once. And, that kind of in a box, as you said, going to the subway, going to work, sitting at a desk all day, that doesn't work for me. So, I had to leave, and it sounds like you realized that you had to leave as well. I'd like to talk a little bit about how you got into this career. So you've laid a little bit of the groundwork about your family and your father and your mother and the differences there and how you kind of veered towards more similar to your father's way of doing things. How and when did you get to where you are today?
I love the question. It wasn't the biology degree. It wasn't that. It was, and then I worked 15 years mostly in telecommunication and marketing and product development, finance, a bunch of different things. It was when I was on my maternity leave with my daughter, my second child, and I realized I wasn't seeing jobs that I wanted to aspire to anymore. I sort of achieved enough in the corporate world that I had felt fulfillment there as well. So I was looking for fulfillment, and I was looking for a better lifestyle so that I could better support my family and myself. And I was in a mother-baby group in Montreal at the time. And one of the women in my mother-baby group said, hey, Claire, I just did this How to Be an Organizer course, but I don't think it's for me. I think your name is all over this.
Really?
Yeah. So she had recognized just in the way I do things and the way I showed up and the way I was living that this was perhaps something I should explore. And that was really about the business end of it, not really teaching organizing principles whatsoever. But I looked into it and I sort of revisited, I don't know if you know the book, What Color is Your Parachute?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a great book for getting into understanding what motivates you and drives you. That's what sent me into marketing in the first place, creative and analytical. I've got both of those, which helps you as an organizer, actually, because you've got to figure out how to slice and dice things, but in a creative way so it suits the person you're working with. So I kind of went through a lot of self-reflection again, and I thought, success for me is figuring out how to use your authentic skills in service of others. So what are you good at, and what could be of value to others? And it just became clear that I needed to invest more time in studying how to be better at helping people cultivate this in themselves, whether it be at home or now my focus is people at work being more productive.
You're making me think about a whole bunch of things right now. What made you jump off that corporate ledge and finally, so your friends saw this kind of thing in you that was organizational in nature, and it was your natural way of doing things. Thankfully, she came to you and she said, I think your name is all over this. But you were obviously still at the corporate, table, literally. When did you jump off that ledge and say, you know what, I'm going to do my own thing?
It started by falling down the stairs, actually. So,
oh, no.
I came back. So I moved from Montreal to Toronto in 2006. And at the time, I'd taken a leave from the company I was working with and was looking for a place to come to here with full-on fear that I was sliding back into the Toronto rat race, if you will, full-on anxiety about it. I ended up taking a job, and I was really successful in negotiating a 4-day work week. So that was a good start for me. But I had come from this ultimate, fantastic job in Montreal, which was focusing on culture change within the organization, 3.5 days a week from home. And whenever I had a meeting, I'd go into the office, but I could work from home. It was fantastic. And then I came to Toronto and I got a job 4 days, and my boss demanded I be in the office 4 days a week, even though when I analyzed the job, only 10% of my job was in person. 90% was on the phone. And so we had a clash of values, I think. And she was a really bright, accomplished woman, no children. I don't think she understood my world.
Right. Of course. It's completely different. It's funny because, we all make choices. We have kids. We don't have kids. Some people like their single lifestyle. Some people like the family life. None of them is better or worse, but there's definitely things that are hard to understand if you've never had to keep looking at your clock and saying, I got to go, I got to get to daycare. I only have 20 more minutes. They're going to charge me. They're going to put my kids in,
And my kid's going to be anxious, potentially worried that I'm not coming. Yeah. I've actually reached out to have a conversation with her to fully understand what her view was. I think there was mentioned to me that I needed to be there from a leadership perspective, but there was nobody to lead. There was nobody that I was working with in my office. So it really didn't hang together for me. And I ended up falling down the stairs in November 2007. And it just highlighted to me the kind of the stress that I was under. And I just thought I can't seem to negotiate myself out of this values clash. When there's a values clash, there's tension, right? And so you either have to decide to accept it and do the best to work within it, try to change it, which is what I had been trying to do, or pivot. And so it forced the pivot in 2008.
Wow. Now, how old were your children at that time? You have 2 kids?
Yeah, 3 and 5.
3 and 5.
Little ones, yeah.
And so that must have been a metaphorical leap of faith for you to determine that you were going to leave what most people would say is a stable, 9 to 5. You got your paycheck every 2 weeks,
yep,
to go into that entrepreneurial world, which, again, we're similar. I did the same thing. So yeah. I feel you, sister. Yeah. But how was that?
Well, I do have to say that because I was married at the time and there was one stable income, that gave me the latitude for sure to play in this. Without that, I would have had to do something more gradual, I think, to be able to do that successfully. So I feel grateful for that at that period of time. But for sure, it's been the right decision stepping into that. A huge growth curve, right? As an entrepreneur, learning how to figure out not only to do the service business and become really good at it, but also to learn how to be a business person and manage all this stuff that is new. And there's a lot. You wear a lot of different hats when you're starting out, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this might be a good time to take a break. And we will come back after a word from our sponsor, and we're going to talk a little bit more about your career, your kids, your life, and some of your best advice. So welcome back to the Parenting Then Now podcast. And before the break, we were speaking with Clare Kumar. And Clare, you were talking about your leap into the entrepreneurial world from the corporate world, and you're living that life now very successfully. And I'm just kind of curious as to what some of the challenges are that you're dealing with your clients now. What are they coming to you with in terms of the issues and problems that they have with their productivity?
I think the biggest challenge is that we are all suffering an assault on our attention. And it's, first of all, recognizing that and realizing we have to stay in the driver's seat of our lives so that number one, we have to have clear intentions about what we're trying to accomplish. When we have those intentions, we can reflect those back to ourselves in a calendar, for example. So one of the things I recommend to my clients is not starting the day with email, but starting by looking at your calendar, which call it your daily roadmap. Like before you go on your journey for the day, remind yourself, where did you say you wanted to go before other people say, hey, I need this from you. Hey, I need that from you. Mom.
But how do you do that? Yeah. That's really hard to do. I love that in theory, but in practice, because I am the first person to say I'm pretty addicted to my phone and my social because, the first thing I do when I wake up, I look at my phone. I look at Twitter. I want to know what's happening in the news, what's going on in the world. How do you get out of that?
Well, I'm just to peel that back for a second, you're doing that. You get a little dopamine rush from that.
Yeah.
Right? So with it's novel for our brains, and our brains, we're designed to crave that novelty. And so that's always going to be there. I think a mindset shift comes from the fact that you know what the value of staying true to what your intention is. If the number of people I work with that say, I worked all day, but the things I wanted to do are still left undone by the end of the day. And I feel like the carpet got pulled out from under me. So if that sense of feeling of lack of control is there, and you want to get back into feeling like, hey, I know what I want to achieve, I know what I want to accomplish in this day, if you can relate the feeling that you have with that little exercise of checking in with your intention first, if you can become intrinsically motivated to check for that, and you get really in touch with the feeling of calm that gave you, then you can dive into Twitter and go play.
I love that. And you know what? I'm hearing something, and what I'm hearing is almost a meditative, holistic perception of what you need to make yourself happy. Am I hearing that?
You bet.
And how do you get to that point? For those of us who are frazzled and who are stressed out all the time, and we're getting these notifications on our phones, and we can't go to sleep without the phone right beside it. Like, how do you coach your clients? Because I'm sure that you get a lot who come to you and say, "Help me," but I don't know how to be helped.
Yeah, I'm writing a book about my methodology here, so I'll just give you the outline very briefly. I call it productivity CPR. And CPR is because it's easy to remember. We know this is something that happens when your heart's not getting enough oxygen and your brain is, and you resuscitate. Well, the idea of productivity CPR is that it pulls you away from burnout. You might be heading towards high cortisol and stress, and you're going to fry at some point. So we want to do the things that bring the calm back. C stands for compass, and this is really where to start. Compass is all about setting intention. Where are you aiming? And the only way we get to know where we're aiming is by stopping and becoming self-aware. And we don't become self-aware by reacting to everything and just responding. We become self-aware by tuning into ourselves and listening and reflecting. And so whether it's a journal, whether it's meditation, whether it's talking to a supportive friend, coach, therapist, somebody that helps you slow down and really sit with what's working for me and what's not working for me so you can articulate those things. That's the huge first step, because once we know what those things are, those intentions are what we set the rest of ourselves up to achieve. So I'll just finish CPR really quick so we can move on. But compass is the intention setting. P is for performance. That's managing you as a human animal so that you can manage your attention to give it to those intentions. So you need to bring attention to your intentions, right? And then R is ritual. So I want to up-level the way we think about the stuff we have to do. And I want to bring honor to it. I want to bring commitment and this bit of sacredness. I don't care if it's laundry or your calendar or your CRM, managing your client communications, whatever it is, connecting back to the intention is really important. Then we can bring excellence in execution in our rituals.
I love that. I love that, CPR. And you coined that phrase in this whole process. I love it. And I look forward to reading your book when it comes out. You'll have to let us know when it's out. And so it's making me think, how, though, you must have a lot of not pushback, but people that you work with that it probably takes a lot more massaging to get them to that point where they can say, you know what, you're right, Claire, I can leave my phone downstairs while I go upstairs to bed, but it's going to take me a few weeks. Like, maybe, do you think that we're going through withdrawal to some degree with our social media, with our digital communications? And how, as a mom, because you're dealing with teens and they probably have a lot of stuff coming at them via social and digital and such, how do you, as a parent, help us? What do we do?
Oh my God, it's such a great question. And it's for parents themselves. I mean, I witnessed my kid's dad for a short period of time walk around in the kitchen, cleaning up the kitchen with one hand and playing poker on his phone with the other. I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
He's not the only one, though.
Doing? No, totally not. And now my kids, too. So number one is setting some guidelines, some boundaries, some rules, some no technology zones. So overnight, The phones are not allowed to be on. Wi-Fi, the kids are taught to set their Wi-Fi off. So their alarms can still work. But their phone, they're not interacting on their phone.
Right.
There is no phones allowed at dinner conversations. And my kids are so well trained. They're like, Mom, no phone, no phone. Like,
so you're doing it.
Well, if I want to show them
is doing it.
I want to show them a picture. I mean, this is the challenge with phones, right? There's everything on it. It's our map. It's our phone. It's our
calendar.
It's the latest thing. It's also our instant gratification for knowledge seeking. Let's just Google the answer to that. Well, can we be patient? Can we learn not to be instantly satiated? Yeah. So setting some boundaries is really, really important for self and for the family. I think that's really a great place to start. And then again, it comes back to intention. So if you've got homework period from 4 o'clock when you get home from school till 6:30 when dinner's on the table, how are you going to use that time? Fuel up, have a nap if you need it, and then ask yourself, is this the most important thing I can be doing with my time right now? Or am I actually giving myself some instant gratification, but I'm going to cause myself some further anxiety?
And it's funny because you're saying these things and they are so simple, yet they're simple. They might seem obvious, but they're not to so many of us. Because when you say to me, Sam, if you get home from work and you're tired, it's okay to just sit down for 20 minutes and relax, and then you go and do whatever it is you need to do. But we're all kind of covered with this feeling that we have to get so much done and there are only 24 hours in a day and we feel guilty. How do you get over that?
I love that you said that. We fundamentally have to make peace with the fact that we can't do everything, right? So the more clear we are about what our priorities are, and I have something in the compass piece, which I call, instead of time management, I want you to think lifetime management.
Oh.
And there's something on my website, actually, that it's a $10 downloadable ebook that you can get.
And I'll link to that in the show notes.
Oh, awesome. It's a 2-hour workbook that you can go through that takes you through an exercise from a coaching perspective to ask you what's important and help work through those things and actually get them into your calendar. So you're showing some commitment to the way that you are intending to show up.
That is so interesting, and I like that. And as you know, on this show, the name of the show is Parenting Then and Now, and I always try to take this comparative look. And we kind of touched on, the way that you've set up things with your children in terms of digital use, social media use. It's very different now than it was when you and I were kids. There are a lot more distractions. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing in terms of the technology and the access that kids have to information and technology compared to how we were when we were kids? Why or why not? And what do you think we should do about it, regardless of what your answer is?
I think there are pluses and minuses. I'll give you a plus. I mean, I was helping my grade 10 student a couple of nights ago with chemistry homework. And if there was not a YouTube video to help bring it back to my poor mind, I would have had no ability to help her whatsoever. But there would have been a textbook. So she's in grade 10 now, and they don't have a textbook for I don't know what reason.
No, they do Google Classroom, and everything's digital. So there's no textbooks. I asked my daughter, and she's like, I don't have a book.
No. So we have this one page of information, which seems sparse. And so I said, well, we're going to just we're going to be creative and think of the questions we need to ask to get the answers we want. And then we're going to watch until we get something that we think is helping us with the trajectory. So I'm not going to diss technology. It's wonderful, but it can also be the biggest time thief you've ever experienced. So you need to stay in charge of that technology, which comes back to knowing your intention and then giving yourself, I call bumpers in your own bowling alley, to when you notice you can veer off, how are you going to nudge yourself back? Is there an alarm that goes off every hour, for example, that says, are you doing the thing that you intended to do?
But isn't that going to cause stress, though, Claire?
It could.
Because I know it would cause me stress.
It won't work for me. But it's something like a little bracelet with a bell on it.
Okay.
Could be also, when I see that, remind myself, am I on purpose now? So it depends. See, the technology right now is designed to be intrusive. And so my biggest advice to everybody I work with is turn your notifications off for anything you're going to think about anyway or check naturally. So you're going to check your texts, you're going to check your email, you're going to check your Facebook. You don't need ever to be reminded that, hey, there's a message for you there. But if you are busy working and hyper-focused for potentially on a project and you know you have a meeting at 12 o'clock and it's 11:30, I have to set a reminder for myself to pull myself out of that focus to go, hey, don't miss your call. So I will set a reminder for that at 11:55 so I don't miss the 12 o'clock call.
Right.
But other than that, what in terms of structuring the day, I want people to know that they're going to produce their best work if they believe that they can carve out 90 minutes uninterrupted and then go into a period of engagement. We actually want to move through our day in about 90-minute chunks. It's the ultradian rhythm.
Why 90 minutes?
It's ultradian rhythm. It's the way we've evolved over years.
Really? 90 minutes? I didn't know
90 minutes
that.
is a fabulous chunk. If you don't get to 90 minutes, the Pomodoro method is one that a lot of people use. It's a 25 minutes, and it sets a timer. But I'm more about cultivating as long as you need. When I was starting to write the book in August, I learned that 45 minutes was before my brain needed to shake up and I needed to move. So I do a 45-minute session, do something physical, have something to eat, drink, and then come back for another 45.
Okay, I'm not that smart, okay? So I need this explained a little bit more to me. It takes me a while sometimes. Okay, so this 90 minutes, is that kind of across the board for that's how long people can work at something and then they have to take a break? Can you explain that more? I'm confused.
Yeah, so 90-minute segments. So if, for example, if I look at sleep cycles, they're on average 90 minutes. They're not always exactly 90 minutes, but we need 5 of those a night.
Okay.
And when we move through our day, attention spans often work at 90 minutes is the maximum. So when I'm scheduling my workshops, for example, now I do 80 minutes plus 10 minutes break. So 90-minute chunks. And so whenever we're designing anything for human attention, that's as long as we want to go. We don't want, and when I was working with people organizing too, we would do 90 minutes and then we'd have a stop thinking break. Refuel. If we tried to go through to the 3 hours, by 2.5 hours, everyone was stressed, depleted, maybe hangry.
Yes.
So managing ourselves within 90 minutes is really a useful tool.
That is such a good piece of advice. I like that. And you're right about the 2 or 3 hours because I teach part-time and one of my classes that I teach is almost 3 hours long. And invariably, I know that after about an hour, between an hour and 15 minutes, so that's almost 90 minutes, I usually say, okay, let's just take a break. Let's take, 10, 15 minutes because you can just feel that everyone is starting to kind of say, okay, enough. So that's good advice.
Well, active listening takes a lot of glucose in the brain. If we're really focused, it's exhausting. We haven't moved our bodies, but we've been burning calories.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Now, back to something that you said about getting your clients kind of into that mindset where they are taking care of themselves, your CPR thing. It almost sounds to me like not only are you a productivity coach, but you're a bit of a therapist too, are you not?
Well, some people would call me that. I'm very quick to say I'm not trained in therapy, and if it's necessary, would happily partner with somebody who needs therapy as well. But yeah, it's very much looking at the person holistically, and from my perspective, offering the wealth of different strategies that I'm aware of. But then there's a sense of experimentation. So, there might be something that you think, oh, absolutely no way, that's not for me. Fine, that's perfect. That's self-awareness at play. So then let's move to something else that feels like it fits for you. And so really the job is, for me, is understanding where somebody is, really looking for things to embrace because everybody has things that are working well for them. And I love to celebrate that. And then we go from there, aiming for what vision they're shooting for. And I've always used the analogy that I'm the hand at your back, helping you get where you want to go, but you're telling me where you want to go.
Yeah.
And then we get there.
You're like that jet stream.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? You should put that on your website. I'm the jet stream.
That's cool. Yeah. Make it easier.
Yeah.
That's the goal. Make it easier and hopefully a lot more fun. We always have a laugh in the sessions.
So now your sessions, tell me a little bit more about this. So you do individual one-on-one sessions, I understand, but you also do corporate. Can you explain the two?
Yeah, so I don't go to people's homes and do the organizing anymore, but I do have a team and I have a network all across North America of organizers that I'm connected to for that physical hands-on piece. But I work with people from a coaching perspective, and it's generally over video. And it's 3, 6, or 9 months usually we work together, and we make massive changes in the way we're approaching life and then choosing how to manage it and how to show up. And trained as an executive coach, my expertise is productivity, but I'm happy to bring the wealth of my experience to any problem that, that's on the table there, whether it's, working beside someone who's working 90 hours, but I'm only working 45, and how do I deal with that? And my friends are really upset that I'm not actually being a lady who lunches. Mm-hmm. Like that kind of question.
So there's a wealth and a range of things that you can kind of pull that productivity catalyst to.
Yeah, so organization, productivity, and really the successful integration of work and life. Mm-hmm. So that what I want people to be is their CFO. And by CFO, I want them to be their chief fulfillment officer.
Love that.
So that they're really, setting those intentions and then sculpting their life, which is sometimes about adding and often about taking away, so that you're sculpting that life of which you can be really proud.
I really like your perspective because I think that holistic, meditative element is so important, and I feel that all of us need more of it, especially in this day and age when there's so much stress out there. There's a lot of negativity in the news, and I feel that parents and children are feeling it. And that's one thing that I know that I can say, unfortunately, compared to when I was a child and probably when you were a child, there's a lot more, I don't know, I think that there's kind of some negativity hanging over us as a society.
Well, I think it speaks a little bit to the pervasiveness of news and the fact that there are TV screens everywhere. And so that even if we're trying not to see it, we can't necessarily avoid it. The number of restaurants that have multiple screens now because they think we need this.
And the notifications, right? So between the notifications, the smartphone that has every single thing that you could ever want on it, and then the screens when you go out, you can't it's hard to turn yourself off.
Well, so we can be more deliberate in the environments we're choosing to put ourselves in. And we can ask. I was at my dentist earlier this week and I said, TV off, please. They put the TV on in a room, and I'm like, if you put the fireplace on, I'll be good with it. But I do not want a news channel up there right now because this is already stressful enough.
That's a good point.
I want serenity here. Mm-hmm. So how can you construct your environment to give you that sense? My daughter is really astute. She knows that, and I'm the same way. Visual images will stay with me. And I will dream about them and I will relive them.
That too.
And so she's like, Mom, I don't want to see that. And I don't even talk about these things. She's got very high boundaries. So if I want to talk about something that I think is worth discussing, I'm very careful about how we go about having the discussion, to be sensitive, because we're exposed to so much trauma and it affects us and we kind of bury it and just move on to the same thing. I was saying on my way here today, there was an incident on the subway where someone had fallen on the tracks. And there's a whole lot of trauma that I felt right away hearing the sirens come, and all of a sudden mentally I could feel in my body that it was affecting me. And I really feel for the people who were there.
Yeah.
So we experience a lot in a day, especially in an urban environment, that we really need to think about, how can I be kind to myself? How can I be really compassionate with myself? And that's the fundamental thing for driving compassion for everyone else out there. But we have to start with ourselves and curating what comes in.
I love that so much. So Claire, if there was something from your childhood, it could be anything, that you wish that you could bring to today's world, what would that be?
Gosh, you know what? I think one of the things that I feel like my kids didn't have that I had and really loved was an immediate neighborhood that I could step outside my door and engage with, a friend across the street. So my kids are in a French immersion program, and because the French immersion program draws from a much wider geography, their friends aren't across the street. They're, in the neighborhood next, or you need a car or a bus or a bike. But on our streets, biking, I wouldn't put my kids on some of the major streets to go. A little neighborhood may be fine, but I think that safety in the neighborhood, that feeling that I could go anywhere and wasn't at risk, if you will, I think that feeling I would love to have today.
I'm an eternal optimist, and I'd like to think that we could return to a community and a lifestyle like that. I don't think that it is gone forever. I think that we can build those types of communities for our families, for our kids, for our, our grandparents. And maybe that's something that we need to kind of look at more than we have been.
Yeah, conscious choice.
Conscious choice.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think that is a great note to end the podcast on. Thank you so much for being here, Clare. I really enjoyed our conversation. You've taught me a lot, and I'm going to take away some of your sage advice, and I'm going to share all of your information on the Parenting Then and Now website. Thank you.
Thank you. A pleasure talking with you, Sam.
We have to make peace with the fact that we can't do everything. This one observation from my interview with Clare was one that stuck with me, as I, like so many of you, try to do perhaps more than I should. It's not possible, feasible, or healthy to attempt doing this, regardless of how we try. Clare's commitment to living her truth and life philosophy, and sharing it with others no less, is likely what makes her the success that she is today. This conversation was both enlightening and refreshing because finding out that we all have the capacity to be our own CFOs, Chief Fulfillment Officers, is something that puts a new light and positive perspective on parenting, life, and, well, just living. Thank you, Clare, for your insight, for sharing your life's journey with us, and for continuing to promote calm, inner peace, and light in this often very stressful world. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and rate and review us on iTunes because it helps other people who are interested in similar topics find us as well. Also, you can find me on social media on Twitter at PTAN Podcast and at SamKJ27. And you can join our lively Facebook group at Parenting Then and Now on Facebook. See you soon.